Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am your host, James Anderson. We are brought to you by WinBet, and we have a very special guest this week, Rob Silver of the Launch Angle Podcast. You've probably heard Clay and I and Jeff and lots of people talking to Rob throughout the years. Rob's one of the best in the biz. Very excited to see you, Rob, in a couple months in Las Vegas, but today we're going to talk some more kind of strategy, some sort of roster construction stuff. I am going to give Rob some hypotheticals, and I think we're going to flush out some cool stuff. But first, how are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing well. We had you on the launch angle last week, and you're 2 weeks ago, and you were awesome. It was so much fun talking to you. We talked prospects, and it was great. And it's been great having all your fellow RotoWire podcasters suddenly reappearing in my stream. You were the lone wolf, the Lobo Cells solo for quite a while. But hearing Zinky back and hearing Scott and Jeff back, even if we're just like kidding ourselves that baseball is just around the corner, and who knows what the future holds. It's been great having everybody back. Doing podcasts again, talking baseball as if there is baseball to be talked.
Yeah, I mean it's really just kind of more of a distraction than anything at this point.
Totally.
Like we are probably a good 3-4 months away from games. So
who knows? I am approaching it as if it's all going to somehow magically work out, and I don't know what date it's going to work out, but I'm assuming I'm going to be in Vegas, and I have my flight booked and my hotel booked, and I am prepping as if I will be doing drafts in Vegas. I have no idea if that's ridiculous, but again, it makes me happy to be acting as if it's real. So why would I do the opposite? That would make me unhappy and sad. I prefer being happy than sad. So that is how I am governing myself.
Yes, I think that's a good way to go about it. As I said, I'm just going to be basically throwing some hypothetical scenarios at Rob here. We're going to do this through an NFBC lens, more specifically a 15-team NFBC lens. Hopefully, even if you don't play NFBC, you find it helpful as we kind of discuss some players and some roster construction ideas. But I know tons of our listeners play in the NFBC at this point, and I think it'll be extremely helpful for them. And so I want to get things started with this question, Rob, because it's a question that I've been faced with in all 4 of my drafts. Let's say that you're picking in the middle of the draft, so you're picking 7th or 8th. In the first round and the second round, you took a hitter and a starting pitcher. Pretty classic build. And you're in the third round. You're in the middle of the third round. Let's say that whoever your favorite third round shortstop is available, and whoever your favorite third round closer is available. And let's even say that all the catchers are available.
Sure.
Are you going to go with one of the shortstops, one of the closers, one of the catchers, or are you going to go completely off script?
See, it's funny when you propose this this format, James. My background's, of course, in politics, and every politician in every country, and this is not getting partisan, I promise. The first thing you learn, like in kindergarten of politician school, is don't answer hypothetical questions. But it would be a really, really bad podcast if you keep throwing hypothetical questions at me and I just refuse to accept the premise of the question. So I'm going to assume in this first hypothetical that the hitter I took, whether it's in round 1 or round 2, had some speed. So it wasn't Vlad. It wasn't even Trout. It's somebody better than Trout in terms of on the stolen base side. So that I'm feeling in this round 3 pick, not that I'm set for speed. So it's not Trey Turner, obviously, who somehow slipped to pick 7. But I don't have a 0 or close to 0 in the speed front. And I'll also assume, just because otherwise I'm going to make a mockery of the hypothetical, that neither Hader nor Liam Hendricks have fallen to me somehow in the third round, so that the best closer on my board is Razel. And if I'm going closer, that's really the choice, because otherwise everybody's going to be yelling at their podcast machines, saying, "Well, no kidding, Hater somehow fell to you there." That seems silly, though. I think by the mains he may be falling in some mains. We'll see there. Um, I think for me, the pick though is Razel, and the reason is it's all about, and I mean this may, fantasy sports is not that different from regular sports. We're all in a copycat environment. When one team does something and it works, everybody the next year decides that's how you win, and we have to do that. So maybe it's all just because Phil Dussault, who you had on a great episode a few weeks ago, this is kind of his approach that he's talked about, and therefore, even those of us who've had some success copy it. But it's very appealing, which is keeping as much optionality open through the draft as possible, and especially with a scarce resource like saves. And again, by the time we're in drafts with opening day right around the horizon, things may be different. There may be more clarity in terms of more rules, and therefore it may be a lot more comfortable waiting into a round 9, round 10 to attack saves. But the benefit of locking down a certain closer, even just one certain closer, I think, is then going forward in your draft, you don't feel like you need to reach. And while Phil articulates it slightly different, that's basically his point. I don't think it was on the Draft Champions podcast where he had some acronym for it. I'm not going to dignify him by repeating his made up acronym. But it's all about trying to get in a position. Like fantasy from the beginning of time, as you know, has all been about, whether it's an auction or a straight draft, you have a finite amount of resources to spend, and you need to outperform those resources with stats by the end of the season. So in auction terms, because I think it's the easiest way to conceptualize it, if you have a $260 budget, by the end of the year, if you want to win your league or win an overall and beat hundreds of teams, you need to get 320, 340, whatever it is, of value out of those $260 of resources that you've spent. Straight draft's no different. It's just picks instead of dollars. There's no one way to do it, but in a roto format, the complexity that's added in, unlike just a pure points league or in a football draft where it all just gets into a point and it spits out a point, is you also have to attack categories. So what I think you want to avoid is there are certain categories you may have to quote unquote overpay for, like saves and stolen bases are the two most obvious. But what you want to try to do is overpay the least while accumulating the most value on your roster, if you accept the fact that I am going to overpay for saves. And I think certainly as of right now, everybody's overpaying for saves. So the only question is, am I going to overpay for a good closer who I think has, let's say, an 80% chance of holding the job, doing the job, and staying healthy through the years, for the years? Or do I want to overpay for a guy who has a 30% chance of performing, holding the job, and staying healthy for the years? Those are made up hypotheticals, but that's the question. Because the only other alternative is I'm punting saves, and I'll hope for the best, or I'll find saves during the season. So yeah, that's why I think my choice in the third would be Razel. How about you? Who would you take in that same hypothetical?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you in the 4 drafts I've done, in the third round, I've ended up with Tim Anderson, Emmanuel Clase, and let's see, no, Tim Anderson twice and Emmanuel Clase twice. So
do you have Clase ahead of Iglesias? Like, is he your third closer?
He is.
Okay. Can I ask why? No, I'm not saying it's the wrong answer. I'm just curious why you have him ahead of Razel.
I just think he's better.
Yeah, so he has the potential. His 80th percentile season is much closer to Hendricks or Hader than Razel, who I think his 80th, 90th percentile season is basically a repeat of last year, which, to be clear, last year he earned third round value. So when I say you overpay, if you can get the exact same season for Razel, you've broken even. And I would argue if you break even on your third round pick, you've done very well with that. Whereas I don't disagree that the Clase has a better season in him. He also has a worse season in him, I
Yeah,
think.
I think it's sort of track record versus skills, maybe. Like I think Clase is the perfect closer from a skill standpoint. Just gonna generate ground balls at like a 60% clip and
Strikeouts.
strike out a ton of
And this is the Scott Genstad point, and he's not a guy who, at least so far in his career, comes in and walks the first two guys, because there is absolutely nothing worse than, I mean, pitchers by definition will walk guys. Nobody's Greg Maddux, who's closing in baseball these days. But there's nothing worse than having your closer come in with a 1-run lead, walk the first two guys, and it's, here we go again, kind of thing. And he doesn't have that problem.
Yeah, and the reason why I think this is an interesting question is because I think if you're picking in the middle of the third round and you're in the NFBC main event, you cannot expect one of the better closer options to be there in the fourth round.
And that is part of optionality, and that is, I think, part of game theory, which is you may be asking me a hypothetical question later on about guys like Jordan Romano, about guys like Will Smith, who are perfectly fine closers to have as your closer one. The concern is, do I want to take them in the fourth round? And if you don't take a top closer in the third round, you may have to. I mean, it's your draft. You can do whatever you want. Nobody has to do anything. So we say this very dramatically. I had no choice but to take him. Well, you always have a choice. It's your pick. You can do whatever you want. And people may laugh at you, but who cares? It's your money that you put down. But you never want to be in a position where you feel like I had no option, because you don't know who's going to drop with them. You never, like, there's all kinds of reasons. So you may be finding yourself in a position in the fourth round where you're truly reaching for a guy if you don't take a guy there. The counter argument to all of this is you are passing on a Tim Anderson there in your hypothetical. And Tim Anderson has really rare combo of speed, batting average, base, hitting on top of a great lineup. And I know we've gotten so blasé of, well, I can find runs, I'll stream hitters. Like, don't be a sucker, Rob, and make the argument that Tim Anderson's going to score lots of runs because he's hitting at the top of a really good lineup. It's like, you can find runs, but they're not coming with 300 average and stolen bases and helping you everywhere else. Like, Anderson's a true 5 category guy, and there ain't that many of those after Anderson's gone, because you didn't get Trey Turner at the start of the draft. And Anderson's not Trey Turner, obviously. That's why he's there in the third round. But that is the opportunity cost. Like, you can't pretend like the argument both of us are making of, like, keep your options open, doesn't come with a massive opportunity cost. And if you don't get Anderson, or you don't like Anderson for whatever reason, like I like Tyler O'Neill a ton. This would be ahead of his ADP, but you're passing on a guy like that here too, who, again, there are not that many guys who have the ceiling and at least now one season of track record of a power speed combo. So it comes at a big cost here in the third round when you take that closer here.
Yeah, and just for kind of full disclosure, so the 2 times I took Tim Anderson were my first 2 drafts of the year, and I was able to get Ryan Presley in the fourth in one and Edwin Diaz in the fourth in the other. And I don't expect that to be a realistic outcome going forward. And I think those were probably December, early January drafts. And then the 2 times I took Class A, I got Tyler O'Neill in the fourth in one and JT Realmuto in the fourth in the other.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was happy with those outcomes. I don't know if those outcomes are all that realistic come main event time.
And the problem is, I could give you back a hypothetical. Like, if you knew that Presley was going to be there in the fourth, do you take Class A in the third? And the answer probably is no. If I knew, like, if you could guarantee me, Rob, that one of those closers are going to be there in the fourth, then the whole decision making process is different. But in real life, you don't know who's going to be there. You can look at, once the mains get going, you can look at ADP and you can do like percentile likelihood that one of these three players are there. And there's different sites that help you with it. If you know basic statistics and Excel, you can create a formula of what is the percentage likelihood of event A, event B, and event C happening. But that doesn't guarantee anything, because that's the nature of the mains. Once they start spread out over 2-3 weeks, depending on how the schedule is set out, is when everybody sees, and I'm making up numbers here, that Ryan Presley's ADP settles at 46 or whatever the number is, and I want Ryan Presley, then suddenly the next draft it goes at 42, and then it goes at 41, and starts pushing up for those limited commodities. So it's tough. I will say this is one of the good arguments for drafting in the middle of drafts, right? Because you have, I won the main overall drafting from spot 15, and I really like the turn too. There are benefits of the turn, but one of the benefits of the middle is you can play a little bit more of the I'm going to push closer here, because in the next 15 picks before it comes back to me, there are 4 closers I like, and 2 guys behind me already have closers. So I think the odds of one of those 4 guys making it back to me is 93%. So I will roll the dice. It's just much harder when you're at the end to play that game. You need to be more aggressive. The flip side is, if you're at the end, you can force other people to be more aggressive. So there's power in both sides, but this is, like, the way you've described those drafts going, I think, is one of the benefits of being somewhere towards the middle of drafts.
Yeah, and this is generally I want to be picking in the middle in just a random year. This is a year though where I think Phil laid it out on the pod I did with him pretty well. I think there is a pretty clear top 7, and then I like the combinations you can put together down at the turn. And I think just in terms of first and second round, the middle is maybe the toughest place to be if you're picking 8th or 9th.
Who is your pick 8th? Assume the top 7 goes the way it goes, and you're at pick 8. Who do you think you take right as of today? I won't hold you to it if you change your mind between now and March.
I've actually had to make this pick twice. One time I took Ohtani, one time I took Scherzer, and I was very unsatisfied with both of those picks. And I think if I was picking 8th again, I probably would pick a third guy.
That's so good.
I think, like, Luis Robert, Ronald Acuna, even like Woodruff, Wheeler, like there's a case for all those guys there.
I mean, that is the interesting thing, is especially if the season, God forbid, gets delayed, then Acuna becomes part of the top 8. I think if his value goes up so quickly every day that the season gets delayed, because he plays in a higher percentage of the games every day. We don't know when he's going to be ready, but the odds of him being ready on May 1st are much higher than the odds of him being ready on April 1st. I don't think that's a particularly deeper revelatory observation. And I think if you knew that he was healthy pretty close to opening day, it's hard to make the argument. I mean, it's not that hard. The argument against it is, how much is he going to run, especially in the first half of the season? I think even if you set his floor on stolen bases, though, at 10 stolen bases over a 6-month season, he's still clearly, I think, in the top 8 of players. So even if you discount dramatically his running compared to the public projection, certainly, or what his stolen base rate has been in previous seasons, I think he's a pretty easy call for the top 8 if he's healthy. And He may be healthy by April 1st, though. I think people are overreading into those videos in the batting cage
No
a
way.
little bit, just a little bit. I think we're all so
Wait.
guilty of
Hold
this.
on. I gotta write this down.
Uh, and you're a guy who actually scouts people. It's amazing how like mediocre professional athletes look awesome when they're in a tank top and shorts and doing whatever it is their sport is, right? Like you could
Yeah.
literally look at Ryan Goins taking batting practice, and you'd be like, "My God, Ryan Goins is going to have a breakout. Look at the way he's destroying the ball there in batting practice, and his arms. He's like chiseled. I don't know what kind of training Ryan Goins has been doing, but he looks awesome. And needless to say, Ronald Acuna is a better athlete, even if he can barely walk, than Ryan Goins is. So it's just so easy to get like sucked in by that because they're all freaks. They're all superhuman. So I really try not to watch any of those videos
Well,
because I'm human too, and I see it, and like even if it's just deep in your subconscious, it's so hard not to say they look so good at what they're doing.
Rob, did you know that Yu Darvish's slider moves across the plate and would be hard to hit if you were trying to hit it?
I had no idea. And then he has other pitches that move in the opposite direction. Can you believe
Yeah.
that? He can both hit the inside corner and the outside corner with pitches. I don't know if there's another pitcher in baseball who's capable of doing that, but Yu Darvish, yes,
It's
he
what
is
makes Yu
capable of
Darvish
it.
special. His
Very
slider
special,
moves across the
special
plate.
and they're quite unique. Yes.
And if anyone wants like some more on just sort of the game theory behind taking early closers, I would recommend looking at Ariel Cohen's thread from a couple days ago. I thought he did a really good job of kind of breaking that down. Um, so the next hypothetical, I kind of want to talk about a couple guys who haven't been getting much run on Twitter lately. Uh, Wander Franco and Jazz Chisholm. Um, Now, my theory is that come main event time, Wander Franco and Jazz Chisholm are going to be going very close to each other. And let's say they might be going early fifth round, early to mid fifth round is kind of where I'm expecting things to settle because I think speed is just going to be prized much more in the main events than it's being right now. And I think there's going to be a bit more of kind of a consensus on maybe some of the limitations of Wander Franco in that department. So let's say that you're picking early fifth round, like maybe 4 picks into the fifth round. Uh, and you're deciding between Wander Franco or Jazz Chisholm, is that a decision you would ever be actually making? Would you just not take either one and just assume there's someone you like more? Or will you humor me and make a call between those two guys?
I will definitely humor you. I don't think that I will be in a position where I like less. There will be somebody in every single room I am in this year who like both of them more than I do. I can say that with a fair bit of confidence. And I posted some negative things about Wander Franco this week on Twitter, and James, I have posted about Middle East politics, abortion, and and who the next president of the United States should be. And I'm quite certain I have never gotten the vitriol that I got. I don't know if Wander Franco has like a bot farm out there protecting his reputation from poor fantasy baseball players like me. Um, Obviously, I love Wander Franco, the player, the real life player. There are 29 other teams that would do literally anything they could to get Wander Franco on their team, but we don't care about that. All that being said, if in this hypothetical, I have to take one of them for whatever, the NFBC has taken a nasty turn and somebody has a gun to my head at the draft table. And if I don't take one of them, it's not going to end well for me. I take Wander Franco over Jazz Chisholm 100 times out of 100, and it doesn't. It's not even much of a decision. So I am willing to be wrong about Jazz this year. Um, Going into last season, Steamer had him preseason for a 665 OPS and the bat a 640 OPS. As everybody knows, the first month of the season, he was spectacular 969 OPS and 85 plate appearances. Then he got hurt, came back. The rest of the season, he has 681 OPS and 422 plate appearances that came along with a 236 batting average and a 296 OPS. If you are a Jazz fan, which sounds weird saying it out loud, but if you like the Jazz, then your excuse is, well, he was hurt and he was never fully healthy again. You can spin a narrative on why first month Jazz is what we should be expecting long term, and pay no attention to what happened for the 4 months of the season after he came back. You could also point out and be quite fair, Rob. I don't care how good a baseball player he is from a fantasy perspective, even though he struggled. And batting average, matters. But why do you keep raising OPS? I don't play in an OPS league. That is not a category I care about. I care about his home runs and his stolen bases, and he was still just fine the rest of the season. Truth. But I do worry about his real baseball skills right now and how good he is. So when I compare the two of them, I think I mean, it is. I think Jazz Chisholm could be on this podcast right now, and he would agree Wander Franco is going to have a significantly higher batting average, 99 times. If we simulated 2022, 99 times out of 100, Wander Franco, who obviously has already an elite hit tool in the league, will challenge, if not exceed 300, and Jazz is at real risk of being below 240. So it's going to be a negative. I think in the power department, I think Jazz's ceiling right now is probably higher than Franco, but I don't know that I wouldn't feel comfortable making a bet who hits significantly more homers than the other guy. And while people drafting Wander Franco, I think, are overestimating his stolen base potential, because that's not what his game has been so far at any level, really. I think when you put the whole package together from just a valuation perspective, Wander Franco for me comes out way ahead of Chisholm. So it's if I had to pick one of them, it's, even though I think he's being overdrafted, Franco, I would take him over Chisholm. You?
I would take Jazz. I know
Yes,
that
I know you're a Jazz fan.
I know that I'm in the minority there.
That's okay. That's why this is interesting.
The people who are coming at you on Twitter, I hope that they hear this and understand that you have some nice things to say about Wander Franco. There is certainly a downside risk with Jazz, and the more smart people like you and Derek Van Riper and others point out the downside with Jazz, potentially I'm wrong about where he's going in main events. Maybe he's going in the 6th round. That would be
good for you.
Could definitely happen.
Yeah.
And then that brings that introduces a whole another level of game theory of me trying to decide when I take Jazz, if there's a chance that he's there in the next round.
How many guests can you have between now and March who don't like Chisholm to talk down Chisholm on every single podcast to ensure you get him a round later?
Yeah.
I think you probably have at least 6, 7, 8 weeks left of podcasts you could do. Just survey the industry and see who you can get on. Sorry, continue making the case, because I obviously really respect your opinion, so I am open to being convinced.
So it's he is a guy that I did not have Jazz anywhere in NFBC leagues last year, because I thought he was just not ready to be an everyday big leaguer. I thought that eventually, and I still had him ranked as a top 35 prospect going into the year, because I thought there were going to be some bumps last year, and then this year would be kind of his breakout year. And I think last year maybe sort of qualifies as a breakout. I mean, he was slightly below league average as a hitter, but 18 home runs, 23 steals. I think that qualifies. So every time that he has been bumped up a level. There's been like a period where he kind of figures out the pitching over a span of time, and I think I saw enough from him last year to think that he will take a step forward this year. Like I think all the points you make are valid. I'm I'm very confident in him holding on to an everyday job all season. I know that is something that people have talked about that with like Adalberto Mondesi in the past, and just saying, well, he's a bad real life hitter, like maybe he loses his job. I think if you look at the team context in Miami, they targeted Jazz in that Zach Allen trade because Jazz was someone that provided the upside of being an up the middle player that they could build around offensively, because they just didn't have anyone like that in the pipeline. Um, and I can't picture him being so bad that he ever gets sent down. And even if he just kind of carries over what he did last year, um, I think that you're talking about 2020, and I think that's an easy projection to make, and I think there's a chance that the stolen bases get up to 30. So I just think that that's a combination of power and speed that you can't get after Jazz in drafts. Like I just don't think there's anyone else out there who's got a realistic shot of getting to those thresholds, and it just really kind of frees you up to do a lot of stuff later on in the draft that Wander Franco does not free you up to do.
Uh, Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you that despite even he will have to struggle horrendously to open the season to be sent down. I don't know that John Birdie is taking his job anytime soon. I do worry that he gets dropped down to seventh or eighth in the lineup if he's hitting poorly. And you can say, well, but he'll still hit home runs. He'll still steal stolen bases. He becomes less interesting to me. From May 1st on last year, Rugni Odor had a 286 WOBA. Elvis Andrews had a 290 WOBA. Jazz Chisholm had a 293 WOBA. I think that I hear what you're saying, and again, you have more credibility on this because you actually put out a list and say I really like him before the season. I do wonder how the market would be viewing him if he didn't have that ridiculous April. And I think that if he had struggled the way he did from May 1st to the rest of the season, when he was one of the worst hitters in baseball, not fantasy, but in baseball, I think the perception of him would be different, which doesn't mean that it's right, that different perspective. You might be getting him in the eighth or ninth round if he hadn't had that crazy 86 plate appearances to start the season. And again, he had those 86 plate appearances. They do count. Like I can't just magic, wave them away and pretend like they didn't happen. But you make a good argument. There is no doubt that he could hit 230, and if he goes 2030, he's easily worth way more than a sixth round pick, and you can figure out your batting average somewhere else. So you can fix that. You can adjust for that. And I don't think he's going to be, despite my cheap shot using Rugni Odor to compare him to, I don't think he's Rugni Odor. Like I think he's better than that, and he doesn't have some of the structural flaws that Rugni Odor does that make him obviously unownable in fantasy at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the whole. A lot of my premise is sort of I'm expecting growth, and you can get into trouble when you expect growth from players, especially when you're having to draft them in the fifth round or even the sixth round. So I mean, I understand why people would be staying away.
Because that is the alternative. Is what if he's 20% worse than he was last year? And if he's 20% worse, it doesn't matter what Miami wants to do. It doesn't matter if it's like John Birdie, who's the replacement. You can't keep putting him out there if he's 20% worse. And by definition, in terms of his range of outcomes, that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, like nobody was expecting Keston Hira to just be without a job at this stage in his career.
Yes.
Even though his strikeout rate was very high
Worse.
as well.
Yep.
All right, we're going to hit a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk more with Rob about some draft hypotheticals, but first, a message from our sponsors. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with the user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 8 states: Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. All right, we are back. The next hypothetical I've got for Rob Silver is, let's say you don't have a closer yet, and it's the middle of the 5th round, and the top 7 guys are gone. Aroldis Chapman is off the board. Ryan Presley, long gone. Edwin Diaz, long gone. Are you taking everyone's favorite? I feel like Dylan Cease is just the guy that in every draft I'm in, as soon as he gets taken, someone complains that they were sniped. So I think he's the most popular. He's got a universal approval rating right now, Dylan Cease. You don't have a closer. Would you take Dylan Cease in the 5th round, or would you take one of the Kenley, Will Smith, Gallegos, Romano types in the 5th round?
First off, Nick Pollock doesn't like Dylan Cease. I did the panel at PitchCon when we talked about Dylan Cease, and Nick came on at the end as our gracious host and made clear he has no idea why everybody thinks Dylan Cease is going to be awesome this year. So if you want to do an hour podcast on why Dylan Cease is not going to be awesome and move that market, James, you can bring Nick Pollock on to make the case against Dylan Cease. I like Dylan Cease, but in your hypothetical, if I'm willing to take a closer in the 3rd round to keep my optionality open, if I don't have a closer and it's the 5th round, let's play the game again. I'm picking in the middle, so there's the odds of it coming back to me again. Or, well, to be fair, it's the same thing if I'm at the end. I assume if I don't take one of these closers here, they ain't coming back to me the next round. Then I would take one of the closers. The closers, you named 4 closer: Kenley, Will Smith, Gallegos, Romano. I would not take Gallegos. So I don't trust Gallegos. I don't. Well, it's not him. I don't trust the Cardinals whatsoever. They are the team that is the most obvious to pull. We all think it's Gallegos. We all think it's Gallegos. They have a 3-1 lead, first game of the season. The bullpen door opens out, and look whose music is playing, and it's the Undertaker who walks out, and it's not Gallegos, and it's like, what just happened? Or it's the 7th inning, and Gallegos is coming in to get the valuable hold in the 7th. So I'm being a little bit glib, but I would not draft Gallegos over any of these guys. In fact, I'm not sure I would draft him over the next tier down of guys. That's just me. I have no inside information whatsoever, but I'd be very happy to take Kenley, Will Smith, Romano here, even though I would have Dylan Cease, like from a valuation perspective, valued higher than all of those guys. I trust whatever happens with Kenley. There is not a team in baseball that's going to sign Kenley for the amount of money that Kenley is going to receive to be a setup guy. There's just no team set up to do that. Maybe the Yankees, but that would be super weird for them to do that. And anywhere else, like anywhere he goes, he is going to be the closer. So I would draft him today with full confidence. Will Smith, I'm fine with. and Romano I really like. I think there's a 10% chance that the Jays bring somebody in, but the problem with even saying that at 10% is, and Fred Zinke talked about Romano with Jeff on the podcast this week. I heard he thinks there's no chance. I think there is a chance if Kenley's market is right. So if they could get Kenley on a 1 or 2 year deal that's not that expensive, they would do it in a second. They've got plenty of money. Kimbrel trade. I don't know if they match up for a trade, but I think they would take Craig Kimbrel's 1 year contract and roll the dice and be very happy to have Romano as the fireman, put them all everywhere role. Those are two guys, and I think the likelihood that Kenley doesn't go back to the Dodgers, that he doesn't have a better offer somewhere else, and the Jays make the offer is pretty low. And like, who knows what's going to happen with the Kimbrel trade. And beyond that, they're not signing Ian Kennedy to close in Toronto, right? Like they're not signing, I don't know what other Colome. They're not signing and giving him the 9th inning over Romano. So it's literally two guys. And in an ordinary winter, they'd both be somewhere else by now. So we'd know Romano is a closer. And I think he's plenty good to run with the job for 6 months. So I'd be just fine with any of those three guys, Kenley, Will Smith, or Romano, as my first closer in a draft this year. I'd probably follow up with a second closer soon thereafter, but I'm fine with that. How about you? Given your answer for the third round question, I assume if you have no closer here, you're also taking a closer over Dylan Cease?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked this question is it was kind of mostly a Dylan Cease question.
Okay.
I would take, I'd probably take Will Smith of the three, or of the four. I think I just really like his situation.
So let's get to let's get to the Dylan Cease question from a different way. Let's say you have a closer, you have speed, but you want a starting pitcher. You want your second starting pitcher here between Musgrove, Gaussman, Cease, Berrios, Flaherty. Who of those guys would you take first?
So,
assume they're all on the board. So you have your pick.
Honestly, none of those guys. Cease is the only one of. I would take Cease.
Okay.
I have not ended up with any of the pitchers you just listed in any of my drafts, and the other three you listed aren't even really on my board because I just absolutely love the pitchers who are going between picks like 80 and 100.
Gotcha.
Like, Trevor Rogers, Alek Manoah, Charlie Morton. Those are guys that I really, really like as SP2s. And Cease I just find him fascinating because I'm not taking a starting pitcher in the range where Dylan Cease goes, and I'm taking either speed or saves there. And so many smart people like him. It's almost, you almost kind of get worried because it seems like it's just that the hype has gotten to a point where he can't possibly live up to the hype. But if everyone is right about him, and almost kind of Logan Webb to a lesser extent, but like if everyone's right about either Webb or Cease and they end up being this year's Corbin Burns, then it would be completely foolish to have passed on them in the 4th or 5th round.
I think that the argument for Cease is, to me at least, he's already had a 32% strikeout rate. It is really, really hard, even with strikeouts everywhere, to get over 30% strikeout rate. And there are reasons to think he's getting better. And I think, and I don't have a study to tell me this is right, that it is easier for a pitcher who has a 30% strikeout rate and a bit of a walk problem to get the walks under control than it is a guy with pinpoint control to suddenly strike out 30% of the guys. You can increase your strikeout rate. We know you can. You can change your pitch mix, you can change your location, you can change your approach. but making that leap into 30% strikeout range is wicked hard, and he's done it already before. So does he need to improve his command, his control, in order to become that elite? It's not fair to him to say Corbin Burns level, because that's like Cy Young level, but he doesn't need to do that to be a great pick here. But to be a top 10 starting pitcher this year, which is still a great pick in the 6th round, if you're getting a top 10 starting pitcher, like, you don't need to squint that much to see where things need to move. You go pitch by pitch through him, like, he has the repertoire. There's a lot there, but I'll leave that for your podcast with Nick Pollock. All you have to find out is that Nick also really dislikes Jazz Chisholm, and then you're ready for him as a guest to talk about these two topics for you.
Yes. Now the pod I did with Phil, like, one of my takeaways from that pod was that it would be kind of interesting to go the no starting pitcher route through the first 4 rounds. And if you do that, Dylan Cease seems like kind of an obvious target as your first starting pitcher in the 5th round.
What I would say to that is, and I would say this if Phil were here as well. First off, I'll believe that Phil is doing that approach in a main event when I see Phil doing that in a main event, because that's certainly not his approach last year. Things may have changed. The player pool may have changed. His valuation, the valuation may have changed. But I think if you at home or you here on the podcast are considering that, James, I think the important thing to do as you plan out a draft, and you can obviously win doing that. There's nothing magical about taking a first round or a 3rd round starting pitcher. What I do think, though, is important is pretend your draft is an auction again. And almost everybody, if you were going into an auction draft, would have some kind of plan of, I'm going to spend X% on pitching and X% on hitting. At least that's my goal. Let's see how it goes. But I'd be surprised if there are many people who would go into an auction without putting little numbers next to each spot as just rough guides and see how it works out. I'm going to spend this much on closers, this much on starters. I want 2 catchers, and I'm going to put aside $20 for the catchers, and so on. A lot of people go into straight drafts and never really think about that. They may say, I'd like to take my first starting pitcher in round 3 and then a closer in round 5 and so on, but they don't necessarily say, and how does this all add up? They may say, well, I'm going to have my 9th pitcher by round 19, but I think that it's important. I have no idea if Phil does this or not. My guess is he does. It's just a guess. Never talked to him, but I've never actually spoken to him. I've only DM'd with him. I look forward to hopefully seeing him in Vegas too. But I think it's important to figure out, like, I am spending X% on pitching. And I think the danger some people fall into when you say, I'm going to push pitching down, is they end up spending a lot less on pitching than they ever would in an auction. And if that's a conscious decision, because you think pitching is risky, because you think you can manage pitching through fab, because of any reason, but you've consciously made the decision, amazing. That's not. It's not. I'm not suggesting there's a right number, but make a conscious decision, because when you push it, you may find that you've spent lower than you wanted to, just because of how it worked out, and you can get into a bit of trouble there.
So let me just throw out this, let me kind of build this out and sort of see what you think of it. So let's say I go speed hitter in round 1, speed hitter in round 2, closer in round 3, speed hitter in round 4, albeit a speed hitter with maybe some warts because they're going in round 4, but a speed hitter nonetheless.
Like give a name to it.
Randy Arozarena.
Yeah, that's who I was going to say, but I don't want to put a word in your mouth.
And then I take Dylan Cease in round 5.
Yep.
I take another closer in round 6.
Okay.
I take Charlie Morton in round 7.
Yep.
And I take I don't know, Justin Verlander in round 8.
Yep. So you come out of round 10 with 5 and 5 basically in your scenario. I think that's fine in terms of a split. I think that's a perfectly balanced split in some ways. You are if you put dollars to every round, that is probably a pretty traditional split. Like it's probably, and I am nobody tweet at me saying, Rob, you were off by 6%. I'm doing this in my head with no numbers in front of me. My guess is that's like somewhere between 30 and 37% pitching, just because it's a steep curve between the first round, second round, third round in terms of if you put dollars on it, and given you didn't take a single pitcher in the first 3 rounds. That's you haven't spent in auction terms your $30 pick, your $27 pick, and your $25 pick on pitchers. You spent it on hitters, but again, that's not bad. And as long as you keep in rounds 11 through round 16, 17, taking in those next 6 to 8 rounds, take another 3 to 4 pitchers. I think that's a very standard split. Standard is, I don't mean as a pejorative or as a compliment, but I think that's a very reasonable split. There are other people, obviously, who are going pitchers in the first 6 straight rounds. They're swinging the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to that whole build working is you've got to get 60 steals probably from those first 3 hitters
Yes.
you take, and then you have to hit, like you have to get the guy, Dylan Cease, Charlie Morton, whoever, like 2 of those guys probably have to really hit for you as
totally. And I've heard Phil. I worried that we're like turning him into some kind of a deity, that we're like quoting him as if he's a biblical figure, that as he said in Deuteronomy 3:17. But like if your 5th through 8th starting pitchers, like including the ones on your bench, are materially better than the guy who took Garrett Cole in the first round, but then pushed pitching down and are using and streaming guys who are giving them a 4.5 ERA. It doesn't matter where you're getting the stats from. If you dominate starting pitcher spots 4 through 10, and again, you don't use 10 pitchers in most leagues, but I mean the guys off your bench or off the fab wire that you pick up are significantly better than the guy who went Cole Wheeler to start the draft. You can have a better pitching staff that way. Part of it depends on your skill set. If you feel I am really good at identifying mid-round starting pitchers and I'm really good at streaming starting pitchers, then you probably shouldn't spend like your 12th round pick on your 9th starting pitcher, because you're not going to be able, or if you are streaming starting pitchers and you spent that much draft capital on starting pitchers, you've probably wasted resources. Conversely, if streaming starting pitchers in a 15-team league seems like a really bad idea to you, you probably shouldn't take your 9th starting pitcher in round 27, because you're going to have to stream starting pitchers, because if he was there in round 27, there's probably a reason why he was there in round 27.
I think part of the reason why you just don't see very many quote unquote smart players doing anything like this is you're not going to come up with a set of projections that don't value the very best aces as guys you should be going after in rounds 1 and 2, and it's hard to steer away from that.
Part of the challenge is we've all gotten too smart. It's like, not to sound like Father Time here, but it wasn't that long ago. The guy who I always use as an example for this is James Shields. And I know James Shields for most people is pejorative because of the Tatis trade. But James Shields, when he was with Tampa, had one, I can't remember off the top of my head what year it was, but he had 1 year which was superficially horrendous, but all the underlying metrics. So like he had a 5.5 ERA or something. Again, somebody's going to tweet at me saying, Rob, you're making numbers up. I am making numbers up. Horrendous year, but every underlying number was still really good. But it was at a time where if you had like a 5 ERA, people wouldn't draft him the next year. He would slide way down. And if you were smarter than the crowd, and you're like, yeah, but look at all his actual numbers, he's still a really good pitcher. You could get tremendous values late from those guys, and you wouldn't be right every time because it's baseball, and especially ERA is such a noisy stat. Even if the strikeout numbers and the walk numbers and the home run allowed numbers are really good, you can have a bad ERA 2 years in a row because baseball. But you could get some real values. Those guys don't get look at Aaron Nola, right? Aaron Nola a decade ago drops not to the 20th round, but Aaron Nola coming off of last year drops multiple rounds. Aaron Nola's draft price is the same as last year. He hasn't changed at all last year. Everybody's just assuming that, well, Aaron Nola in some ways was better last year than he was previously. So I'm paying up for Aaron Nola. It's annoying. That's part of what makes it so tough is we're all looking at the exact same thing. Some of us manipulate numbers and are convinced we have some secret formula that makes us this much smarter. And with pitchers, you can dive in. You can spend an infinite amount of time looking at pitch mix, breaking down spin rates and everything. But at a certain point, in a world where strikeout rate and walk rate are still the most predictive stat that you can find, and everybody knows that, and everybody looks at the same strikeout rate and walk rate numbers, I agree with you, James. It's really hard to find these diamonds in the rough pitching wise. It's really tough.
That was good. I could talk about starting pitching builds all day. Let's get to this next question. And this one I think is interesting. I'm excited to see where you take this. So let's say it's late in the 6th round. You've got one starter, one closer, and you load it up on speed with your first 3 hitters. So in theory, you've built a roster where you can kind of go any direction you want here in the 6th round. What type of player do you expect to be eyeing up there?
I think, and I hear what you are saying, but I think I want my second starting pitcher there. So if I am good for speed, so I don't need India. Actually, I should say this. There are 2 guys that I want. It's either Jorge Polanco, if he is on the board, or one of the starting pitchers who are there in the 6th round. Jorge Polanco, and I know you have a question coming up that kind of takes him off the board, so I just wanted to do my Jorge Polanco rant. I don't think people realize how good Jorge Polanco was and probably just is. Like last year, he was bad in April. He had 206, 1 home run. In April, it was atrocious. From May 1st on, he was tied with Aaron Judge and Pete Alonso for 12th most home runs in baseball. Of the players who hit 30 home runs from May 1st on, only 3 had more stolen bases than him, Tatis Ohtani and my boy Teoscar. Only 5 players with 30 or more home runs had a better batting average than him, and only 5 had a lower strikeout rate than him. He finished Razzball as player 26, I think it was, last year. I'm not calling him as like a second round value again, but I have him ranked pretty close to that. I think you go stat by stat for him, and maybe that was a career high power year, but I think he's still going to be a good power hitter. I think the Twins lineup should be better this year. People forget what a good park that is to hit him, and that he has multi-position eligibility for in-season flexibility is a bonus. So give me that in the 6th round every single day.
Should my Wander Franco question have been Wander Franco versus Jorge Polanco?
Oh, Polanco in a second. Like it wouldn't even pause to think about that. I would take that's actually the argument against Tech taking the sexy new thing, whether it's Chisholm or Franco, is why would I take either of them when I can get Polanco? And is Polanco going to hit for the average of Wander? No. Does he have the stolen base upside of Chisholm? No. But boy, I like that floor a lot more. And the ceiling from an earnings perspective, like a fantasy dollar perspective, Polanco can easily out earn either of them. So I have Polanco ranked ahead of him, of both of them, and I would take him over both of them.
Yeah, I've been using Polanco as sort of, or I had been using him as sort of a why on earth would I take Bobby Witt in the 6th round when I could take Jorge Polanco? But Bobby Witt's ADP, I feel like, has been slipping over the past month or two.
You've done God's work. If I were a Bobby Witt fan, you've done the work of the Lord, James. Dropping down his price. Now you just need to find like one of your apostles to do the same thing for you for Chisholm.
You should still also take Dansby Swanson over Bobby Witt. So keep that price dropping. So yeah, your answer basically is Jorge Polanco or best starting pitcher available.
Best starting pitcher on my board. Yeah,
that's interesting. I love this pocket of starters who go in like the 7th and the 8th, which is the only reason I sort of asked that. Like I love. I mentioned Morton. I mentioned Manoah. I've really started to come around a bit on Blake Snell. I'm willing to take Luis Garcia as high as the 8th round, and I think he's in for a huge year. I haven't taken Justin Verlander or Nate Eovaldi yet, but I see the case. And so I asked it because I kind of like the pitchers who go a couple rounds later as much as the pitchers who go in the 7th round.
Here's my warning for you, James. I think everybody does, and I think these guys are going to have a ton of like. I know by definition, not everything can have helium, and not everything can get pushed up in March. But the problem is there aren't 15 of those guys, and there's certainly not 20 of those guys. And I don't think there are going to be a lot of teams who are going to want to leave the 6th to 10th round with not a single starting pitcher, because unless you've gone like 3 starting pitchers in the first 6 rounds, and I'm going for this tier of closers, like I need, where is my pitchers coming from? And therefore, I think there are going to be some wild runs on these guys. And if I'm picking at 15, and I'm like, look, the ADP for the last month has said I can get one of these guys 30 picks from now. So why would I take them over here? You may find that I'm coming back in round 8 thinking that like one of them will be there because that's what ADP said. And it's like, holy cow, I am taking Eduardo Rodriguez now, who I don't really even like because I need a pitcher, and they're suddenly all gone.
That's the funnest part about seeing those first main event draft results is just sort of seeing like, oh crap, all right, this is what's happening.
The one thing I'll say about Justin Verlander is I think if I simulated again the 2022 season a million times in this hypothetical world, I'm an omnipotent power, and I could run the season through for 162 games a million times. I think Justin Verlander outperforms Max Scherzer 45% of the time. Actually, that's not right. I think he outperforms him 35% of the time. Max Scherzer outperforms Justin Verlander 40% of the time, and in 25% of the time, one or both of them are injured and are old and broken. But of the seasons that both of them make it to 150 innings, so take injury out of this, which again, injury is a big part of both of them, their profiles. I think that Scherzer is better than Verlander 55-45, 52-48. Put injury back into it. I'm not entirely convinced that Max Scherzer's that much safer than Justin Verlander coming off the surgery and full year of rehab. And the Carlos Rodon argument of like, I'm really worried about Rodon because the White Sox knew him better than anybody. They wouldn't even make him a qualifying offer. What do they know that I don't know? Love the skills, but holy cow, they're a smart organization, and they wouldn't even give him $15 million. He's clearly a healthy Rodon, is worth more than $15 million. I'm out on him. Well, the Houston Astros know Justin Verlander and his rehab and his like recovery better than anybody. and they gave him a 2-year contract, not like a Ken Giles 2-year contract where it's we don't really expect anything the first year, but boy, 2023 is going to be a good year. They pounced and basically outbid everybody in the market, shut down the market for 2 years, whatever it was, $50 million, serious money for like a pitcher Justin Verlander's age. And they are very smart. They may be, dirty cheaters, but they're certainly a smart organization, and they were aggressive about it. So I think the Rodon argument works as well the other way for Verlander as not. And it's interesting to me, if you buy anything that I've just said, that Max Scherzer is, people may not feel great about him as a first round pick, but it's not like, oh my God, look at all these idiots picking Max Scherzer in the first round. Whereas Verlander is very much what you said, which is, yeah, I don't mind Justin Verlander, but he's sure not a priority at like pick 100 or whatever it is. Well, if you buy what I just said, like, isn't he a huge priority at pick 100?
Well, I can picture dozens of people listening to this and just being like, Rob, shut the hell up.
I've said too much, unless I'm trying to drive Justin Verlander's price up because suck it, suckers. Now you're going to spend a 6th round pick on old man Verlander.
It'd be fun to like everyone like, or for us to just come up with like a list of 10 starters going after pick 90 that we think will be going in the 5th round of main events, and just see who can get the most guys right. Because
So the honest truth is, I think that you may need to take a starting pitcher in round 6 before the run starts if you want your pick of the litter. So it may be a luxury you don't have to be screwing around and saying, well, I love the guys in round 7. You love the guys in January in round 7 and early February in round 7. If you want one of them for sure. If you want to pick the guy as opposed to let the board dictate to me who the guy is, you may need to get him in round 6. But I could be wrong. Like, people are still taking speed. Like Miles Straw. I want to talk about Miles Straw before we wrap up, so I want to make sure we get to the last question too.
Yeah, so I'll just do that. So let's say we're around pick 95. It's early in the 7th round. You are light on speed. That is something you did not address properly with your first 6 picks. Edman's gone, Polanco's gone, India's gone, Varsho's gone. You are eyeing up Christian Yelich, Miles Straw, or the best player on your board who doesn't help with steals. What direction are you going to
go? So Miles Straw is not on my draft board. I will not draft Miles Straw. I will not draft players, and I'm trying this. This is a self, obviously by definition. There is no the hypothetical guy with a gun to my head from the earlier question is not here. I've chosen to put this on. I won't draft guys who have a projected OPS of 700 or lower. My podcast colleague Jeff Zimmerman and Tanner Bell in the book, their wonderful book that if you haven't read, you should definitely read. The Process, have this chart that is seared into my brain, which is the percentage likelihood of a player based on their projected OPS of hitting below 650. What's magical about hitting 650 or lower OPS is players don't keep their jobs at 650 or OPS. Like, it's just, you're too bad a hitter to keep your job for more than a week or two, and therefore something has to change. Either you're hurt or you're sent down to the minors, or you sit on the bench and work with the hitting coach until you can hit better. And for a player that has a 700 OPS, it's basically a 2 in 5 chance, 40%, that they're going to hit 650 or lower, which, if you think of the distribution of probabilities, makes a ton of sense. So this is not the likelihood that Miles Straw gets hurt. I'll assume he's young and fit, and his likelihood of spraining an ankle or pulling a quad are the same as any fit young guy. But a 2 in 5 chance of him just sucking so bad that he can't keep his job is way, way, way too high for me, certainly in the first 10 rounds. And so when I say the rule, like, if I have a guy in round 27 that I think he could be interesting, then yeah, I would take him, like, because those guys are going to get waived anyways, the first fab period. But if it's pick I'm counting on, it's just much easier for me to take the guy off the board. And when I look back at if I'd had that rule last year and in previous years, for every Tommy Edman that you miss out on, there are 7 or 8 guys every single season who lost their jobs, who lost playing time. So it's not an all or nothing um, proposition. Like if I am taking Straw, I am counting on 600 plate appearances. He could get 200 plate appearances, and the answer always is, but Rob, who else do they have? They have nobody else. They're going to have to play Miles Straw, and the answer is, if somebody's hitting 650 OPS, there is always somebody better. There just is somebody better in the system that they can find, or off the waiver wire, who can put up a 700 OPS at least. So Miles Straw, it doesn't matter how badly screwed I am in the speed at this point of the draft, is off my board. I'm sorry if don't say that I've drafted Miles Straw in all 4 of my drafts so far, and I was counting on him carrying all my teams to glory.
I have no Miles Straw shares. I think I am more willing to take him than you are, because, well, I know I am more willing to take him than you are, because he's on my board. But I part of the reason why I have been in on Tommy Edman in recent years, and just have never been in on guys like Malik Smith or Adolis Garcia. Well, not Adolis Garcia, but just the Malik Smith types, is just the defensive factor of, like, I just think the guy is a good enough defender that he gets an extra bit of leash that a guy who's just kind of a butcher out there doesn't get. And when I combine the defense with that depth chart, I do think I don't quite buy that it's a 40% chance. I'm not saying it's a 0% chance, but I think it's maybe closer to a 15% chance that he loses his job in the first 3 to 4 months. And he's let's say, like, Yelich is gone. Yelich is going ahead of him anyways. You don't want, like, I'm not going to go into a single draft this year with the idea that I'm going to get Miles Straw, but I guess I can see scenarios where I think he's the lesser of the evils available to me, because I've, for whatever reason, have messed up stolen bases, but I am being extremely aggressive on steals earlier on. And that's why I haven't ended up with Miles Straw anyway.
The only thing I would point out on Miles Straw, because we shouldn't have a 2-hour debate. You should do a separate podcast, a 2-hour debate on Miles Straw. Is every single word you just said, other people, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, made about Tavares last year for Texas. It was, look, I hear what you're saying, that he does not project to be a very good hitter, but who the heck could they possibly use in the outfield if not him? It's impossible. And 10 minutes later, it's like, nah, Delino DeShields can do what he's doing, or we have like guys you've never heard of before that we'll put out there because he's just struggling. So I don't know that he will struggle. I am acknowledging fully, when I say there's a 40% chance of something happening, that also means there's a 60% chance of it not happening, which without giving away all my secrets, is higher than 40%. But I don't think it's a good probability play whatsoever. And the problem with the draft is, when you've taken Miles Straw, when you take a Tavares last year, use an example where it actually worked out. I write in pencil or type into my Roto Lab that I've got 20 stolen bases, but I need a little bit more power now. So the rest of my draft now has an assumption embedded in it, because I have a guy. It's the same as taking Gallegos as my closer. I have 30 saves now. You're not backing up Tavares with more speed just in case Tavares loses his job. He was your 9th round pick or whatever the hypothetical was. You move on, and therefore it's a big hole when you realize he's just lost his job. Different from a guy that you have for 20 home runs, 3 stolen bases, and like 70-70. Those guys you can plug away at filling. The guy who I would take here, it's not Yelich. It's the guy who somehow has become his like Siamese twin in draft discussions this year. I believe in Cody Bellinger's bounce back more than Yelich. So if I felt really good about my team and felt like I could have a luxury pick here, and because I don't have a speed pick, but I'd like to have the potential at a bit of speed. Um, I think I think if I mean it's easy to say if I knew that Cody Bellinger was healthy and that he would stop screwing around with his swing and was smoking less pot all season, then I think Cody Bellinger is a better bet for a bounce back than Yelich. It is really hard when you go through baseball history, and I like doing this, and people I think roll their eyes like it's irrelevant and something that old guys do. But I like seeing if I'm making a claim and nobody's ever done it before, at least understand that what you're trying to do is historic. But the opposite also works. There are not a lot of guys who have started their careers as good as Cody Bellinger and have just gotten bad suddenly. There are guys obviously who have been really good and then got hurt and just couldn't perform physically anymore. But I don't think that we think that Cody Bellinger's injury is so bad that he shall never recover again. And therefore, it is very hard to find a guy who starts a career at a very young age, is so good, and then just forgets how to hit. And whereas Yelich is much older, and there's a real scenario that it's like Miami Yelich again. There's a lot of other I've both have health concerns about Yelich and I have performance concerns about Yelich. Whereas with Bellinger, if you could guarantee me that he's healthy, I will make the bet that he's good again. And good Cody Bellinger is a first round pick.
Rob, how excited would you be to see a video of Cody Bellinger that went viral in spring training because he made contact with a baseball?
You joke. Somebody who we both know, who I will not name because this would embarrass him and he'd get pissed off at me, says he has a buddy who saw Bellinger at a batting cage taking swings and he looked awesome, and that he is working out for the first time in his career this winter, and he is committed to smoking less pot. And I could not have rolled my eyes harder when when my friend told me this piece of secret intel. So what could we get that would change my mind, like give me confidence in spring training? Like it's not even exit velocity. Like if he hits a home run 120 miles per hour exit velocity, what does that tell me? It's that Cody Bellinger is capable of hitting the ball really, really hard and really, really far. It doesn't tell me he's going to be healthy for 6 months and stop screwing around with his swing. I think you are making just a bet here if you take Cody Bellinger. But I think on a risk reward perspective, if there isn't Polanco there, if there isn't India, I would take India ahead of Bellinger too if he was there, but he wasn't there in your hypothetical. I think it's a risk I'd like to make, not on every team that I draft this year, but on one or two teams, because I think if it pays off, it can obviously pay off huge for you.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a handful of guys here where we could see their main event ADP be quite different than what their current ADP is. Rob, is there anything else you want to say before we get going?
I feel like I've said too much already.
Well, I really, really appreciate it, man. You've been too kind with your time.
Oh, no, this was a ton of fun just sitting around talking baseball for an hour. This was great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun here as well. This has been the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast brought to you by WinBet. Clay and Todd will be with you tomorrow.